In the heart of the Motor City, a tragedy was unfolding, one that would unveil the dark underbelly of secrets, prejudice, and violence. The life of a young transgender woman named Clara Mitchell was snuffed out on a frigid December morning. Her murder would not only serve as a grim reminder of the dangers faced by those who dare to live authentically, but would also set off an investigation that would lead to an unexpected suspect, a man of the cloth, Pastor Samuel Hayes. Pastor Hayes was a prominent figure in the community, known for his impassioned sermons and charitable endeavors. He was seen as a beacon of hope, a pillar of faith in a city often shrouded in darkness. Yet beneath this facade of piety and righteousness lay a hidden life, a life that, if exposed, would shatter the illusions surrounding him and force the city to confront its own demons. Clara, born Curtis Mitchell, had always felt different. From a tender age, she understood deep within her heart that she was a girl trapped in a boy's body. Growing up in Detroit was not easy. She faced ridicule, rejection, and even violence for daring to embrace her true self. Yet Clara was a fighter, refusing to let the hatred she encountered extinguish her vibrant spirit. She dreamed of a better life, a life where she could finally emerge as Clara, free from the chains of societal expectations. To survive, Clara turned to sex work, a perilous profession that put her at risk every night. However, it was a means to an end, a way to save every penny in hopes of one day affording the surgeries that would allow her to fully transition. She yearned for a world where she could walk down the street unafraid, where love and acceptance would no longer be distant dreams. But that dream was brutally shattered on that cold December morning. Clara's life, full of promise and pain, was stolen from her, and the investigation into her murder would reveal a shocking truth, one that would lead detectives down a twisted path of deceit. As the police began their investigation, Officer James Carter, a seasoned veteran with weary eyes, was wrapping up his shift. His thoughts were already on a hot cup of coffee in the warmth of his bed when something caught his eye. A figure lay sprawled on the sidewalk near a dimly lit alley, an area notorious for its late-night activities. With a pounding heart, Officer Carter approached the scene, his flashlight illuminating a gruesome sight. There lay Clara, motionless on the cold concrete. Her eyes were closed, her face pale and still. A dark stain bloomed on her chest, spreading ominously. Officer Carter knelt beside her, checking for a pulse, but it was no use. Clara was gone. The victim was later identified as Clara Mitchell, a 26-year-old transgender woman whose life had been tragically cut short. But Clara's death was different. It would expose deep-seated secrets and a web of violence that would send shockwaves far beyond the streets of Detroit. As the investigation into Clara Mitchell's death commenced, the detectives quickly uncovered evidence that would lead them to Pastor Samuel Hayes. Security footage from a nearby motel showed Clara entering a room with a man just hours before her body was discovered. That man, identified as Pastor Hayes, sent shockwaves through the community. How could a man of God, revered for his powerful sermons and commitment to his faith, be involved in such a heinous crime? The evidence began to mount. Detectives discovered that Hayes had been leading a double life, one hidden behind a facade of righteousness. He frequented online chat rooms and dating apps, often seeking encounters with transgender women. While he preached morality and virtue from the pulpit, he indulged in his hidden desires under the cover of night. Investigators learned that Hayes had met Clara online, exchanging intimate messages for weeks. On the night of her murder, he had arranged to meet her at the motel. What began as a consensual encounter took a dark turn, the details of which remained murky, shrouded in the secrecy of that motel room. One thing became clear: something had gone terribly wrong. Perhaps overwhelmed by guilt, shame, or fear, Hayes turned to violence, taking Clara's life and silencing her forever. The arrest of Pastor Hayes sent ripples of shock through the community. His congregation was devastated, struggling to reconcile their beloved pastor's actions with the man they had admired. The case quickly spiraled into a media sensation, with news outlets across the country reporting on the fall of the pastor and the tragic death of Clara Mitchell. Yet, amidst the sensationalism, Clara's story was often lost. She was more than just a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend with dreams, hopes, and aspirations. Clara deserved to live a life free from violence and discrimination. The news of Clara's death hit her family like a tidal wave. Her mother, Margaret, collapsed upon hearing the news, her cries echoing through their small apartment. Clara's siblings, still reeling from the shock, struggled to understand the brutal reality of their sister's murder. Despite the hardships she faced, Clara had always been a source of joy and laughter in their lives. She was the life of the party, a beacon of light in her family, and now that light was extinguished. Margaret would often sit by the window, staring out at the city streets, hoping to catch a glimpse of her daughter walking by, her laughter echoing in the air. But it was just a cruel trick of the mind, a phantom image that deepened her sorrow. Clara's siblings each grappled with the loss in different ways. Her older brother Jacob became withdrawn and angry, his grief manifesting as simmering rage. He couldn't comprehend why someone would harm his sister, or why the world could be so cruel. Meanwhile, her younger sister Lily found solace in memories, clinging to the happy times they had shared. The family gathered for Clara's funeral, a somber affair filled with tears and whispered condolences. Friends and members of the LGBTQ+ community came to pay their respects, sharing stories of Clara's kindness, resilience, and unwavering spirit. They spoke of her dreams, the future that had been cruelly snatched away. Margaret stood before her daughter's coffin, her voice choked with emotion, as she spoke of the pain of losing a child, the emptiness that would forever haunt her. As the funeral drew to a close, a sense of determination settled over Clara's family. They would not let her death be in vain. They would fight for justice, recognition, and a world where transgender individuals would no longer be targets of violence and hate. They vowed to honor Clara's memory by carrying her spirit of love and acceptance into the world, ensuring that her light would continue to shine brightly even in the darkest of times. The arrest of Pastor Samuel Hayes was merely the beginning of a tumultuous journey for Clara's family. While many were quick to condemn him, others rallied to his defense. His congregation, torn between their faith and the horrifying accusations, struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the crime he was accused of committing. Some whispered that Hayes was innocent, a victim of conspiracy, pointing to his years of service, dedication to the community, and unwavering faith. They argued that he was being targeted for his beliefs and lifestyle, while others saw him as a symbol of hypocrisy and violence. The trial of Samuel Hayes became a battleground for these conflicting narratives. The prosecution painted a picture of a man consumed by his desires, who used his position to prey on vulnerable individuals. They presented evidence of his online activity, secret encounters, and attempts to cover up his crime. In contrast, the defense argued that Hayes had been lured into a dangerous situation and acted in self-defense. They portrayed him as a man struggling with internal demons, a flawed individual who had made a terrible mistake but was ultimately not a murderer. The courtroom was packed with spectators, each holding their own opinions and biases. Clara's family sat in the front row, their faces etched with grief and anger as they listened to the testimony, arguments, and accusations, hearts heavy with the weight of their loss. As the trial progressed, whispers of doubt grew louder. Was Hayes a cold-blooded killer or a flawed man caught in a web of deceit? The jury faced the daunting task of deciding his fate, wrestling with these questions as the verdict hung in the balance. The courtroom fell silent as Samuel Hayes stood before the judge, dressed in a somber suit. The weight of the accusations hung heavy in the air, the eyes of the jury fixed upon him. After weeks of testimony, arguments, and deliberations, the moment of truth arrived. The jury foreman's voice trembled slightly as he read the verdict, guilty of second-degree murder and felony firearm possession. A collective gasp filled the courtroom as Clara's family wept silently, their faces a mixture of relief and sorrow. Hayes, his face pale and drawn, stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the floor. The judge, his voice grave and measured, sentenced Hayes to 25 years in prison, acknowledging the complexities of the case and the challenges faced by the jury. He spoke of the sanctity of life, the devastating consequences of violence, and the need for justice to be served. Given the opportunity to address the court, Hayes spoke in a low, halting voice. He expressed remorse for his actions, acknowledging the pain he had caused Clara's family and his own community. He spoke of his struggles, his internal conflicts, and the shame he had carried for so long. He pleaded for mercy, asking the court to consider his past service and potential for redemption. But his heartfelt words could not erase the tragedy that had unfolded. Clara Mitchell was gone, her life cut short by a senseless act of violence. As the trial concluded, the case of Samuel Hayes and Clara Mitchell served as a stark reminder of the complexities of human nature, of the dark secrets that lurk beneath the surface of even the most respected individuals. It highlighted the challenges faced by transgender individuals, the prejudice and discrimination that often lead to violence and tragedy, and underscored the importance of compassion, understanding, and acceptance in a world that can often be cruel and unforgiving. The verdict in the Samuel Hayes case sent ripples of unrest through Detroit. It was not merely a simple murder trial. It had become a symbol, a flashpoint in the ongoing struggle for equality and justice. The city found itself deeply divided, split along lines of faith, morality, and social justice. On one side stood those who believed Hayes was innocent, a victim of circumstance and prejudice. They viewed him as a good man who had made a mistake, one deserving of forgiveness and a second chance. Many in his congregation remained loyal, their faith in him unshaken. They organized prayer vigils, circulated petitions, and spoke out in his defense, arguing that he was being unfairly targeted. On the other side were those who saw Hayes as a symbol of hypocrisy and violence. They pointed to the undeniable evidence, the tragic loss of Clara's life, and the systemic discrimination faced by transgender individuals. They demanded accountability, not just for Hayes, but for a society that often turns a blind eye to violence against marginalized communities. Activists organized protests, demanding justice for Clara and calling for an end to the hate and prejudice that fueled her death. The case became a lightning rod for debate, sparking heated discussions in homes, churches, and community centers across the city. Newspapers and television stations were flooded with letters and calls, opinions clashing, and voices raised in anger and frustration. In the midst of this turmoil, Clara's family struggled to find peace. They were grateful for the conviction, for the small measure of justice served, but they also understood that the sentence wouldn't bring Clara back. Their mourning continued, compounded by the ongoing public debate and the lingering divisions within the city. The case of Samuel Hayes and Clara Mitchell had become a mirror reflecting the complexities and contradictions of a society grappling with issues of identity, morality, and justice. It transcended the courtroom, resonating in the hearts and minds of Detroiters for years to come. Clara's story became a rallying cry for the LGBTQ+ community, highlighting the dangers faced by transgender individuals, particularly those involved in sex work. Activists seized the moment, demanding greater protection for transgender people and calling for an end to the discrimination and violence that plagued their community. The case forced a reckoning within the religious community as well. Hayes's hypocrisy, the double life he had led as a pastor and a closeted man seeking encounters with transgender women, shook the foundations of many congregations. In the wake of Clara's death and Hayes's conviction, conversations began to take place that had long been avoided. Some religious leaders called for greater understanding and acceptance of LGBTQ+ individuals, emphasizing the importance of love and compassion in the face of difference. Others, however, doubled down on their condemnation, clinging to traditional interpretations of Scripture and reinforcing harmful stereotypes. The case had a profound impact on Clara's family. While they were grateful for the conviction, they also understood that no amount of justice could bring Clara back. They channeled their grief into activism, becoming vocal advocates for transgender rights and working to ensure that Clara's story would not be forgotten. They established a foundation in her name, providing support and resources to transgender individuals in Detroit. They organized community events, raising awareness about the challenges faced by the transgender community and promoting understanding and acceptance. The ripple effects of Clara's death were felt throughout the city, sparking conversations that challenged assumptions and forced people to confront their biases. As the prison gates clanged shut behind Samuel Hayes, the sound echoed the finality of his sentence. No longer a pastor or a respected member of the community, he was just another face in the overcrowded prison system. Life behind bars became a harsh reality check for Hayes. Gone were the comforts of home, church, and family. He was surrounded by hardened criminals, men who had committed far worse crimes. He lived in a constant state of fear, always looking over his shoulder, wary of the violence that could erupt at any moment. Days turned into a monotonous routine of menial jobs in the prison laundry or kitchen, mandatory counseling sessions, and attempts to avoid trouble. Hayes had ample time to reflect on his actions, the choices that had led him to this dark place. He wrestled with guilt and shame, the weight of his sins pressing down on him. Prayer provided little solace. His faith felt shaken, his connection to God fractured. He received letters from his former congregation, some expressing forgiveness, others condemning him. Each letter was a reminder of the life he had taken and the pain he had caused. As the years passed, the prison walls, once cold and imposing, became a familiar backdrop to Hayes' life. The rage and confusion that had once consumed him slowly gave way to quiet introspection. He was no longer the man who had walked through those gates, blinded by secrets and desires. Prison life, with its harsh realities, stripped away the pretense he had carefully constructed. In unexpected places, he found solace. In the shared stories of other inmates, in quiet moments of contemplation, and in the simple act of helping others. He became a mentor to younger prisoners, sharing his story as a cautionary tale, urging them to choose a different path. Hayes discovered a talent for writing, pouring his thoughts and emotions into poems and essays. He wrote about his regrets, his longing for a second chance, and the lessons learned through facing his own darkness. His writings found their way outside prison walls, published in newsletters and online forums. He received letters from strangers touched by his words, who saw in his story a glimmer of hope, testament to the possibility of change. He even began corresponding with Clara's mother, Margaret. Their letters, initially filled with pain and anger, evolved into a fragile understanding, a shared grief that transcended boundaries of blame. Through these exchanges, Hayes learned about Clara's life, her dreams, her struggles, and her unwavering spirit. He came to see her not just as a victim, but as a woman who deserved love and respect. The day Samuel Hayes walked out of prison as a free man, the world felt both familiar and strange. The air smelled different, the sunlight seemed brighter. He was older now, his hair streaked with gray and his face etched with the weight of his past. Yet there was newfound clarity in his eyes, a sense of peace that had been absent for years. Returning to a city that had changed, Hayes found that Clara's name was etched in the collective memory, a symbol of the ongoing struggle for transgender rights. Her family had become tireless advocates, their voices echoing in the halls of power, demanding change and accountability. Though Hayes could never fully escape his past, the guilt and shame would always linger, a constant reminder of the life he had taken. Determined to use his experience to make a difference, he sought opportunities to share his story with community groups, churches, and even prisons. He spoke about the dangers of prejudice and hate, the importance of acceptance and understanding, and the transformative power of forgiveness. As he reconnected with his family, rebuilding strained relationships, he found solace in their love and support. He continued to write, his words reaching a wider audience, offering messages of hope and healing. Albert Hayes' legacy became a complex intertwining with Clara's tragic death, a legacy of hope, a testament to the possibility of change and redemption. This story serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human nature and the enduring power of hope. It's a narrative about love and loss, prejudice and acceptance, and the struggle for justice alongside the possibility of redemption. Clara's life, though tragically cut short, became a catalyst for change, sparking conversations about the challenges faced by transgender individuals and the urgent need for equality and understanding. The story of Clara Mitchell and Samuel Hayes remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of forgiveness. It emphasizes the importance of building a world where everyone, regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation, can live free from fear and violence. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you found this story insightful, please subscribe and leave us a like. We would really appreciate that.